Finding a rental property is now more difficult than ever. Things are particularly bad in the capital, where some students say their rent is going up by more than $400 a week. Meanwhile, others are finding themselves being forced to disclose how much they would be prepared to pay in rent, effectively tendering for rent in their applications for properties. For more, the Property Institute's Ashley Church is with us this morning. Tēnā koe, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too.
Why is this so bad? Why are we looking at these record rent increases?
Oh, look, I think probably to put it in context, I suspect you'll find if you were to analyse this that it's only a very small portion of landlords, so it's certainly not endemic across the
But you've been warning about this for a while.
I have. So, but as I say, put that in context, when you look at the figures that we presented to you guys about a month ago, and we gave an analysis of what was happening around the country, the university cities, the increase is actually lower than most cities. So that's not to say that this isn't happening in the student sector, but we need to put it into some sort of context. Having said that, I think it's reasonable to suggest that there probably are some unethical landlords. I don't think there's a large number of them, but there are some people who are taking the opportunity to extract a bit more from the market.
When you say taking the opportunity, what do you mean by that?
Well, for example, Hayley talked a little bit earlier about the $50 additional top up to the student allowance, and I think that there is a very small number of landlords who are saying, hey, here's an opportunity to put my rents up by this amount, and so there's a little bit of that going on, but there are some reasons why landlords would put their rents up, and they're probably more fundamental to what's going on in the market in the longer term. But there's some things around, so for example, you and I have talked a lot, Jack, about capital growth and the fact that there's been pretty significant increases in property values over the last few years. Those are tapering off. We all recognise that the market's flattening. So landlords are business people, so what they're looking at doing is finding other ways to maximise the value of their assets. So there's a little bit of that going on. And the other one is, and I think this one shouldn't be underestimated, is there's quite a bit of fear out there about what Labor's likely to do with the rental market over the next 2 or 3 years. And so what is happening, I think, is there's a little bit of trying to make sure that there's enough in the kitty to actually cover some of the additional costs.
What sort of changes are landlords fearful of?
Oh, there's a few of them. Capital gains tax is obviously a biggie.
But that's unlikely to happen for
it won't happen in the short term. It'll happen after 2021. But these things aren't always logical. People do things on the basis of impressions and, you know, whispers and things. But things like ring fencing of tax losses, which will have a pretty significant impact on landlords. And there are other things which are probably good things, but they still have a cost impost. For example, the legislation around healthy homes, which I don't think anybody thinks is a bad idea, but it's going to be a cost to somebody, and so that cost has got to be given.
What do you make of this tendering for rent?
Yeah, it's interesting. I read that last week, and I actually can't get too outraged about it, and the reason for that is that's how the market works. That's what the market has always done. To be fair, this is a little bit more extreme. This idea of actually putting a tender process in front of a tenant is a little extreme, but the property market itself, the rental market itself, that's how rentals are determined. That's why, just to finish that, that's why if a rent's $600, you don't pay $800 because the market says it's only worth $600. And that's how we buy houses. We've always bought them that way.
But that certainly disadvantages people at the lower end of the market, doesn't it?
Yes, it does, but it advantages people. The majority of people are advantaged by that mechanism because it actually keeps rents down. That's why you have a market that says you're not going to charge $200 more than an average rental in an average property because the market's not going to accept that. So that actually does work both ways.
Let's look at this from a tenant's perspective. Do you have some tips you can give people who are trying to get in a rental property at this time of year?
I do. I can give probably 5, and the first one's going to make me sound like a curmudgeonly old grandfather, but it's actually quite important. And that one is just to remind students in particular, put yourself in the shoes of the landlord and remember that these people are often putting properties on the market that they're actually losing money on. And so, you know, it's not a one-sided equation. Important.
That's a good luck. Yeah, good luck with that one. Selling that to the students of the world who are seeing their rent go up $400 a week.
The capitalists amongst them, the entrepreneurs amongst them will get that.
The business students perhaps.
The second one is, and this is actually really important as well, most students want to live in accommodation that's relatively close to the university, so maybe consider your options. Maybe because where these excesses are taking place, they're likely to be in apartments and in dwellings that are close to the unis. So maybe think about living a little bit further out and taking advantage of transport options because there's going to be less of this sort of thing taking place. The third one is, and I know again this one sounds like one of these things your mum would tell you, but present well and have good references, because as much as it's about money, for a lot of landlords it's also about just having some confidence that their property is going to be looked after. So if you front up, and if it's your first year and you haven't got property references, get character references, something that actually demonstrates you're somebody who they can trust with their property. The fourth one is don't become part of the problem. If there are excesses going on with tendering processes and people offering extreme prices, don't be one of the students that actually puts up an outrageous offer and actually make the problem bigger than it is. And the last one is, and landlords are pretty good people, but I would suggest where possible, and this isn't always possible, use property managers. And the reason I say that is because property managers, there's an organisation, for example, called the Independent Property Managers Association. They actually use a code of ethics that actually makes sure that these sorts of excesses don't take place.
Well, there's the tenancy tribunal as well, where you can go if you want to question some of these excesses. But those are great tips. Thank you so much, and great to see you again for our first catch-up in 2018. Ashley Church from the Property Institute.